So this is as far as I got, but I think that I was able to show you what we were able to pull off yesterday, trying to maximize point density. And what I was unable to do was to actually show you exactly this little zoom around, this flyover, but with the full point density of 1,500 points per square meter. But you get a pretty great idea at 500 what we're dealing with. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and every single one of these points, as you're going to see in the presentation that I may or may not even get to, we have a return absolute accuracy of plus or minus about 4 centimeters, which means, and we've shown this by actually returning to the same place a year later, reflying it, and then testing it, and that's what we find. That's actually a lot better than what we were finding, for example, with a much more expensive neon aircraft system, where we were getting things like 20 centimeters of vertical difference between a year of flying. So how am I doing here? I have 17 minutes. All right, so I used up over half of my talk to just show you this data. I hope that it was worth it, because I think that it's super exciting, this data comparison, and because, raise your hand if you happened to be on the field trip yesterday and you saw any of this happening. All right, so we've got a good percentage of you were actually there, so I think that it's going to be really fun to see it. For those who didn't see it, that's why I showed you the bus with the gear under the bus, so now you know exactly what we did. So basically, my talk is going to be about the GatorEye, the system that we use to collect all that data, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the sensor specifications, and at that point I'm going to get into some adventures that we've had with it, and in the future presentations I'll probably include some slides actually from today, because this is another great adventure from yesterday. So basically, I've been really excited about sensor fusion, and really until recently sensor fusion was in the realm of these fancy aircraft. Started out with the CAO and now going into the AOP, flying LiDAR, RGB, hyperspectral data. Different systems starting to do that as it comes along. My initial inspiration was doing my PhD using CAO data in Hawaii, where we spent 4 years climbing trees, rappelling down off of ropes with Lycor 6400s, and then being able to, in 3D, model leaf gas exchange throughout the forest. And we successfully did this, generating really interesting models of how does light pass through leaf clusters, and how does temperature change with different leaf area densities, and then modeling the whole thing from the forest. And I was like, this is amazing. I can create virtual forests. So I talked about the big plot, and now I'm talking about virtual forests. Maybe it's something everyone talks about, but for me, the ability to create a virtual forest means that you have the spatial detail to be able to go in there and have a representation as if you were an animal of choice, whether you were a jaguar, whether you were a deer or a pigs or something like that, or a leaf, responding to its microclimate. However, leaving my PhD, I realized that I had nothing and I could create no virtual forest. So I was like, well, maybe I should get one of these. Literally, actually, one of the first UAVs, it was unmanned, but it was pigeoned. It was a PAV. So I was like starting up, I was like, well, what can we do on a small budget of a startup for a faculty? So we said, well, let's try to create a sensor fusion drone, GatorEye. This was 3 years ago. Basically what I did was I convinced a couple commercial companies to work together who are now fierce competitors and wouldn't work together at this point because they're like, oh, okay, we can do the whole thing ourselves, so they don't work together anymore. But they should. and thanks to a lot of help from a lot of different groups, we managed to get this whole system together. This is my family here, my field team. We've now traveled around Brazil and Peru, Costa Rica, Mexico, collecting data. And this is the summary of the systems that we have on the GatorEye that you saw. We got the LiDAR, hyperspectral, visual, and we're about to undergo the initial goal was to be able to switch between flight platforms. You can tell that the advantages of an aircraft would be, oh, we can fly for hours covering huge areas, and we do have this aircraft now, but we're going to basically use it just for high-res cameras because these things crash and burn all the time, and we do not want to crash and burn our fancy sensor suite. The hexacopter is great, as you're aware, because you can take off literally anywhere. Oftentimes we're flying out of small forest gaps in tall tropical rainforests, takes off, collects a kilometer of data, different plots, and comes back, and we have to thread back through these plots in order to get the drone back on the ground. Those can be challenging. So this is the present. So right now we're already going into the Gen 3, which has changed. You're seeing the VLP-16. It was a big problem. It was amazing. We got a lot of great data, but with a 100-meter range, there's no way we were ever going to go and fly in Indonesia where they had 99 or 100-meter trees. So that was out of the question. Now with our upgrade in 220-meter range, we can go to Indonesia, we can go to Malaysia, we can even go to the parts of the Brazil where we have the 88-meter trees, and I think Ruben Valbuena identified those recently, or was it Eric? So we've got our different systems, hyperspectral, visual. Inside here is the IMU. Basically, you can put it in your hand. These values are now outdated as we recently upgraded, but basically you can control the point density of this system, which just always pumps out the same number of points per time period. You can control it by going higher or lower, by having higher or lower side lap, and by changing how fast you fly. So anytime that when I think of a science mission, I'm constantly thinking of those three parameters and also considering how much risk is there and what's the value of the science in terms of that risk and all these factors, and you end up getting your final point density. So of course you get enough point density to be looking at DEMs and DSMs. This is flying in the Chico Mendes in Acre, again with my family here. My son here is just a few months old there, I think maybe 8 months old. So this is some plots in Acre where Daniel De Almeida right now is working on integrating it. See the ground hits even here. Even with the other sensor, if you fly low enough and dense enough, you can still get good data. But now we can get it so much faster with the new upgrade. So how do we know what is the accuracy of here? Basically, we developed a system where we can install all of these LiDAR structural reflective targets. We fly over it, we GPS them, and then we can actually find those triangular targets automatically in the point cloud and force fit the triangles into them so that we know exactly where it is. Because you're never going to have a LiDAR point hitting the very tip of, you're trying to say, is this sub-centimeter or what? You need to know exactly where it is. Well, it has to be a statistical fit on a structure in order to get that accuracy. So we did that. Obviously, field GPS points work terribly under the tree canopy, but once you start getting them into the open, we're now getting alignment of 2 centimeters between our field-derived differential, RTK, everything, GPS from the structural targets and our own point cloud here. So we're getting great absolute accuracy of these points. We're getting a ton of points. We can fly high. We can cover big areas. So it's really opening up a new exciting era of big plots. So of course, hyperspectral data enables a whole different idea of what we're dealing with. The intensity is the part about the LiDAR data that starts to enter the realm of what is it that we're looking at beyond structure. Is it healthy? What might it be, leaves or wood? But that's still a total research area. How much time am I doing? 12 minutes, all right. So hyperspectral is really the data that starts to allow you to think about, well, what is the species composition? Is it healthy? Is it water stressed? What species might it be? How diverse it is? All these types of factors. And so, unfortunately, it's not an active sensor. It doesn't penetrate through the forest like a laser system does. It kind of lays over the top of it all. So it tells you about what's happening at the top of the canopy surface. The smaller your pixels get, as they get bigger, you start to get more mixture in them, and you might actually be getting some data from further down. However, a hyperspectral pixel, the data there is what is reflected from the sun. So as you get further down into the canopy, you also get less sunlight, and so there's less reflective, and so those areas become less and less important, actually very quickly. So in general, in its simplest form, you are getting an idea of what's happening at the top of the canopy surface. Because we can fly and collect data that's just a few centimeters in spatial resolution, depending on the size of the leaves, we can actually be getting pixels that are 100% a leaf. And that is totally different than what the kind of data you'd be getting from the Neon AOP or something, where they have 1 by 1 meter pixels as default, and that is always a gigantic spectral mixture analysis issue. And so you need these crazy signal to noise ratios. We don't even need that because we're flying low, microscopic pixels, and this beautiful. So we just get 272 bands, tons of data. You can get a lot of it, and this is really where a lot of our our workflows and our process is moving beyond the LiDAR right now, which we have down pretty good, and really starting to focus more on the hyperspectral. Over the next year, we're going to really crank this out, the fusion of that. And then coming up, even in the next week, I'm going to be installing a new radiometric thermal sensor and very high-res visual. It's going to be an amazing data collection, all simultaneously collected, enabling a lot of any type of question, basically, you might care about. So this is actually the new Gen 3 that's going to be coming up. We would have already done this. I specifically did not do this upgrade because of this conference, because there's a chance in the process that we'd like brick the system, and then the lead engineer I'm working with is going on vacation, so then we might not be able to get it working. And then I couldn't have done the demo yesterday, and so it wasn't worth the risk. However, I'm really excited next week to start working on this full integration. So it's really, for a radiometric sensor, basically thermal, it's really important, and you don't see the external shutter here. It's really important that you have an external shutter. Otherwise, what you get is cooling around the edges of the thermal lens and not in the middle. They cool differently, and when you take a picture, you actually see this vignetting of thermal differences that's completely not the reality. So what you do is you have an external shutter, you click it open really fast, and then you get good, solid, normalized radiometric thermal data as you're flying over. It's not good for videos, so we're going to be taking snapshots, and we're going to be georeferencing this the same as we're doing for this line scanning hyperspectral system. This is more like a satellite than your cell phone or a visual camera. It scans one line at a time, and it does 80 lines. We set it to be 80 lines per second, and then we actually shoot the hyperspectral data down into the point cloud from the simultaneously collected LiDAR in order to know where that hyperspectral data is located, and we get a hyperspectral 3D point cloud. And then you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with that. Basically, this is what that fusion would look like, and basically trying to get virtual forest. This is an example from Greg's Asner's Carnegie Airborne Observatory, but basically you're getting the structure along with all of the hyperspectral data, and then, well, the radiometric as well, and the visual data and all that stuff. So now you have such the massive data volume. How do you fuse it all? What do you do with it? So really the future, as probably many of you are already working on, is image segmentation. This is the best way to quickly take massive different types of data and get one simple, understandable item from it. And the best example is that you can look at me, and I am literally a combination of different patterns and colors and illuminations and textures and you name it, and I'm even moving, and your brain and your eyes know at any time where am I and what parts that you're seeing are me. You're segmenting me in spite of so many differences that are happening, and that's really convenient, because if you were to classify Eben based on the color of my jacket, you would have only this jacket, and then you'd also have this screen back here classified as Eben, and it would be a big mess, and you'd just close your eyes and give up, which isn't useful for surviving and evolution. So we have evolved to be amazing image segmentation systems, and I think that our analytical tools and software in the future will also be continually evolving to use image segmentation to fuse structure and spectra and thermal data, if you can, or you could say that's spectra or not. Put that in there. So basically understanding what it is that's out there. For me, what would I want to segment as an ecologist? Well, this is 15 seconds of data, single pass over. I'd want to go through there. I'd want to identify automatically the treetops. This is using algorithms, treetop detection on a paper that's coming out in a couple weeks with Carlos Silva. Going through there, you can now segment all the trees automatically. Click a few buttons. You segment your point clouds of your trees. You get all your crown diameters automatically. You can see that the points in space are actually distributed. With the hyperspectral data, you can start to say what species they are, and you start to get all this automatically. So that's really great. So how does this compare to an aircraft? Well, if you had an aircraft and we wanted to do our flight over Itaipu Biological Station yesterday, first, it would be impossible. We'd never get permissions to do that. Two, even if we could have gotten permissions, we would have needed probably $50,000 in order just to do a single flight over 4 hectares. Instead, what we had was about a plane ticket and an awesome hotel with a beach pool and good food. And so, you know, very different scenarios here. There are actual operating costs to this system. It might not be $10,000 or $30,000 a day or whatever these, you know, it depends on the aircraft. I think, you know, you can talk to people with aircraft what their operating costs are. But our operating costs are about $350 per flight. Taking off, a lot of that is in insurance or data storage. It's a massive amount of data to download, to store, and everything. So getting all of that, but there's very big differences. Aircraft, you can get a lot more area. You might get a lower point density. You almost certainly would. And then you're going to have maybe more spectral bands, but bigger pixels, so they all play off on each other with ultimately what you can get. Very field portable. Get your little ones in your stroller, and remember to bring your your cartoons, and you are good to go for data collection anywhere around. So what is the standard processing workflow? Everyone here is a LiDAR expert. You just got to go out there, you fly an area. This is a really big area. We collected 310 million points over 6 hours, the entire USP campus, Isalki, and we collected this whole thing, basically 310 points. This is what it looks like. And then you can just start stripping away from using LAS tools, and Martin's, somehow he gets these unbelievable efficiencies. You compare it to some other software and it just crashes, so I'm really a big fan of that. You get these unfiltered point clouds, you just fuse it in here, strip away everything, as you know. You gotta, with the previous LiDAR unit, it had terrible data off of low reflectance surfaces. All the roads, all this stuff was just black, and I've talked to people about this problem. Apparently, I don't have that problem anymore because that's what I saw in the data yesterday. Anyways, we have workflows generator for all this where we just fill in all those surfaces correctly, and then basically we can create these beautiful DEMs and then get a CHM over it. So we can see through the forest. That's one of the advantages of LiDAR data. We can see through the forest, we can go anywhere, and this is an example of very high resolution optical data. This is what we could see before in Island off of the coast of Cedar Key near my university, and then once we did LiDAR data, we now flew it over and we found 900-year-old shell mounds that are actually an archeological site, and this paper is coming out in about 2 weeks in PNAS, and as far as I'm aware, this will be the highest impact paper using drone LiDAR that has come out yet. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case because I haven't seen drone LiDAR used in PNAS science or nature so far. So this is going to be a big deal. And what do we use it for? We use it for archeological site identification right off next to my home. So how cool is that? We're continuing these projects, coming down and doing more of these identifications. And so I only have like 2 minutes left, but we've got some papers out where we eat acai cremoso. You should go get some. It's delicious. And you know, LiDAR is so great because this is kind of like what we did yesterday. You can see all the standard metrics, but you can see through it and start understanding where stuff is located in 3 dimensions. And so this is so much information. Maybe it's not needed for, maybe it doesn't improve dramatically biomass calculations, but what it does improve is things like why are birds distributed in certain ways? Why do animals move in certain patterns? What would be your experience as a person walking through the forest? So drones aren't easy. We've crashed our drones quite a few times. This summer we crashed it in Peru. Last summer we crashed it in Peru. We seem to always crash it anytime we go to Peru. Anyway, so this is us trying to fly in the Andes using a 30-meter DEM with dramatic elevational shift, and we flew it straight into the top of a tree because we just cut the edge of the curve and ended up in a tree and spent a day tracking it down, and there it is, 30 meters up. We found a local guy who's not a tree climber, but he said, I can do it. And I was like, all right, what do you need? He's like, I just need to take off my boots and give me this clothesline. And he went up there, unbelievably, and brought it down, and we'd broken a propeller, and we managed to continue collecting data in 2 other countries, or Costa Rica and Peru. We got what at the time was the highest density drone LiDAR of a tropical forest that I've ever heard of, because you have to crash your drone into the top of a tree and have it sit there for a few hours to get this type of data. But that's pretty awesome. But you know what? With that puck upgrade and that flight pattern that we just did, I would argue that we're getting data like this now. And we don't have to crash the drone at the top of the tree. So that's an amazing thing. Fortunately, we can fix these things, and then we can link them with birds. So that's something that or dinosaurs. So that's something that I love for the LAD profile, is trying to understand animal distribution. And this is in northern Peru. Point counts, thinking about how does that 3-dimensional leaf area density, how does it interact with birds, climate change, elevational gradients. And so almost all the students in my lab, surprisingly, are conservation biologists. So I'm dealing with all these algorithms and hardware and all this development and stuff for jaguars. What does it mean for toucans and different things like that in our different countries? And what are the metrics to get at this? So I think in just 2 minutes I'll probably be able to wrap this up. So that's pretty good because I'm just zooming through these photos here. So something that I'm really excited about in talking about birds is linking forms of remote sensing. We get our virtual forest, but then we can map now using a custom Sound Mapper 4D package that our lab was developing. We can map sound and identify species, and this is actually where we use sound and the speed of sound in different locations to say where are birds and what other species in space, and we can link that into virtual forests. So that's a really exciting next step that we're trying to get at, and I'm just thrilled about linking 3D or 4D bioacoustics with point clouds. It's going to be great. So I'm really excited that Gabriel Prata, you can talk to him right here, is going to be joining my lab for the next couple years, working on mapping data and sensor fusion. He'll probably be talking to many of you, thinking about GEDI and ISAT and GatorEye data and aircraft LiDAR data to try to understand hurricane damages. So this is an example of how you can just simply fly once over 30 plots and just get massive amounts of data without having to deal with photogrammetry returns and side lapse and everything. You just fly once over it, you get tons of data. You don't need more data than this if your plot's only 100 by 100 meters. Just fly over it once, you're good to go, and you're going to see all these types of hurricane damages here, just trees totally flattened. We live in an area with a lot of interesting natural wind disturbances, and then we can run all these automated. You really want to, the more data you get, the more automated you want to get, so trying to develop these systems to identify gaps. And we had a paper recently in our package come out on that with Carlos Silva, thinking about that, looking at changes in height dimensions. And of course, trying to understand, well, how does one compare to the other so that we can maximize everything. Multi-sensor, multi-platform fusion is really the exciting future. And how do we segment it and extract all that ecological data that we want? So comparing systems TLS to DLS and all that stuff. So, you know, we've crashed drones in Costa Rica. Sometimes we find them, usually we find them. You can bring them down, you can just take them to the local electrician, get them repaired out in the middle of nowhere in Costa Rica, and it takes a couple hours and they don't work, and afterwards, and then you got your cows here, so you got to watch out where you're landing. And it's a fun family experience here. My son just exhausted, having spent all night drawing calculations, trying to bore sight our hyperspectral sensor. So, a lot of fun coming ahead with drones. I'd like to thank everyone. I can't believe I actually deleted like 20 slides, so I'm glad I did that. So thank you.